I've been a Browns fan since they returned in 1999, and in those years, I have never seen a coach on more of a hot seat than Freddie Kitchen, at least with the fans. See, at every turn, it seems Browns fans want Freddie Kitchen's head for a multitude of reasons, some fair, some not. But instead of discussing Freddie Kitchens in his hot seat for the 40 millionth time this season, let's talk about who will fill the role if he does get fired, because that's where things get a lot less clear. Sure, some will point at Ron Rivera as some type of savior figure for the Browns to hire, but Ron Rivera has never, one, been that guy, but two, not the guy you would call in to fix a struggling offense, seeing as a struggling offense is the reason he's available in the first place. Then you have Mike McCarthy, who has a great resume and had great offenses in the past, but he also has had issues managing player egos, has a reputation for being stubborn, and his offense was stale the last few years in the league, and those sound like the absolute opposite guy you want to bring into the current situation that the Cleveland Browns have. And now some are even pointing to Kevin Stefanski as an option. But he has even less coaching experience than Freddie Kitchens had, who is a man you would fire in part because he is too inexperienced for the job. So where can you find an experienced coach who has an offensive system that will fix the problems of this offense? Well, it might just be Pete Carmichael Jr., the longest tenured, most successful offensive coordinator in the NFL that you've never heard of. Pete Carmichael Jr. has been a coach in the NFL since the year 2000 when he got his start in Cleveland as a tight ends coach. It was after he was let go by Cleveland where he would get connected with Marty Schottenheimer, who was the head coach in Washington in 2001 and was fired after one 8-8 season. And after that, Pete followed Marty Schottenheimer to San Diego as an offensive assistant. It was there where he would meet Drew Brees, someone whom he would go on to have a close 20-year working relationship with. But it was in San Diego under Schottenheimer where Pete would start to climb up the ladder in his NFL coaching career. But in 2006, following a disappointing season and infighting between the coach and the GM about young quarterback Phillip Rivers and then more veteran quarterback Drew Brees and the direction to go with the team, Marty Schottenheimer was fired yet again, leaving Pete looking for work, as Schottenheimer would never coach in the NFL again after that. But luckily for Pete, he made an impression on Drew Brees, who was also on the move that offseason as he was a free agent. And Drew Brees recommended him to then first-year head coach Sean Payton in New Orleans, who hired Pete and made him the quarterback's coach for the New Orleans Saints. And in 2009, after Doug Marrone, who's been a multiple-time head coach, but at the time was the offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints, left for a job at Syracuse University, Pete Carmichael would take over as the offensive coordinator, where he's handled those duties for the last 11 years and helped take the Saints offense to the next level, being the offensive coordinator for the most productive years of Drew Brees' career and his Super Bowl run. Drew Brees and the Saints offense would put up video game numbers under Pete Carmichael. During this time, the cumulative stats for Drew Brees are 106 wins to 60 losses, over 50,000 yards with a 70% completion rate. That is ridiculously good, and 373 touchdowns. So it's safe to say that Pete Carmichael, at the very least, did not impede or get in the way of Drew Brees, and at the very best, really took Drew Brees' game to the next level. Now, if you watch the Brett Coleman video about Baker Mayfield, the Ballad of Baker Mayfield, which I do recommend everybody doing, go check that out, you would have learned that Freddie Kitchens has had issues designing plays with Baker Mayfield's limitations in mind, mainly adjusting to the compromises Baker has to make because he's only 6'1" and not a taller quarterback. And while that may seem like a simple fix on first glance, on a deeper dive, as Brett takes in his video, you see how those adjustments aren't as simple as the solutions describe them to be. And part of the problem is simply the offense that Baker Mayfield is in, right? Baker Mayfield's offense is a combination of Bruce Arians and Todd Haley's systems. These are offenses with big, strong offensive lines and tall quarterbacks in mind. When you look at the Bruce Arians system, you see somebody who was successful in it as Carson Palmer. When you look at the Todd Haley system, you look at Big Ben as someone who was most successful in it. And that is why Freddie Kitchens' offense is kind of a bad fit for a quarterback like Baker Mayfield. And yes, while they did find success in late 2018 when Freddie Kitchens took over, I'm a firm believer that they found those adjustments by accident more than it was by design. See, Baker and Freddie have both stated that what happened in 2018 was that Freddie just asked the offensive guys what plays in the playbook that they want to run for the last 8 weeks. It just so happened that the plays that were picked out happened to be the few plays in the playbook that are good fits for a shorter quarterback like Baker Mayfield. And the problem with that is when you're 2-6-1, have nothing to play for, you can get away with running 30% of your offense. But when you have 16 games to play, you're one of the most talked about teams in NFL, and you've added Todd Monken and Odell Beckham, who are going to be more interested in the other 70% of the playbook that you threw out in the last half of 2018, then you have a situation that exposes Freddie's offense to be a poor fit. Now, yes, if Freddie is not fired, he can simply make changes, but that's not as easy and as simple as just picking the Saints playbook on Madden. But then that brings me to Pete Carmichael Jr., who is, in my opinion, an absolute perfect fit offensively for Baker Mayfield. Who else knows better how to adjust a scheme and protections for a smaller quarterback than the guy who spent the last 20 years doing just that for the best small quarterback to ever play the game? Not just that, but Pete's experience with Drew Brees, not only as a superstar, but as Drew Brees was developing and grew into that superstar that we now know as the first ballot Hall of Famer Drew Brees, would be valuable experience and lessons for Baker Mayfield to learn, who is trying to develop into what he will be for his career. And the Saints offense and his experience is not just a good fit for Baker Mayfield, but it's a great fit for the entire offense, for the key personnel on this team. Pete Carmichael Jr. has used guys like Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham to great success. Just look at what he's been able to do with Michael Thomas. And I don't know any NFL fan that is not currently salivating over the thought of Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb being in an Alvin Kamara type role. And even if your questions is, how can he handle both running backs? Well, Pete Carmichael had Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara before, and the offense was very, very good. They even fit in a third running back. And David Njoku can fit into the Jimmy Graham role with ease. Pete has spent the last 11 years solving the problems that the Browns currently have on the offensive side of the ball. From adjusting your scheme to a shorter quarterback to making sure all of your receivers are happy and getting the right amount of targets to making sure that you have a consistent and productive run game. Pete Carmichael has solved all those problems in New Orleans that are currently existing in Cleveland. He has had to make adjustments and fill roles with many different types of guys in his offense. And at this point, he knows what works and what doesn't. And there isn't a lot of guesswork like there is currently going on with a less experienced head coach like Freddie Kitchens. So even though he has not had head coaching experience, he knows his offense very well. So I really do believe that the growing pains would be minimal. Sure, he's not a flashy name. Sure, he's not a big name. But I think he is the right name. Now, when it comes to a guy like Pete Carmichael, there's not a lot of information out here. So what are some of the issues that somebody might have with hiring Pete? Now, let's face it, as much as I love the idea of Pete bringing the Saints offense to Cleveland, there are some serious questions about Pete as a head coaching candidate that I have. A lot of these questions have to do with the lack of hype surrounding his name. Now, I get that Sean Payton is considered an offensive genius, but how has a guy been the offensive coordinator for 11 years of the league's hottest offense of the decade and still nobody has heard of him? His name does not pop up as a candidate like Josh McDaniels does every year. How does this happen? It's a question that really puzzles me and concerns me that there is some kind of inside information about the guy that is preventing him from being a serious head coaching candidate, because other Saints coaches get more buzz than him that have done much less in that structure than him. Now, maybe this is Sean Payton being smart and keeping hype low on one of his most crucial assistants, but that is a question that needs to be answered. Also, what kind of network does this guy have? Is he going to be able to bring in some well-respected assistants and some veteran coaches to surround him and help him in his first year? Or will we end up with the same supplemental free-for-all that landed Freddie Kitchens a very underwhelming supporting staff in his first year? And those aren't the only questions about him. There are a bevy of questions. How much responsibility did he say and have in New Orleans? Is he a product of the Drew Brees buddy system? And is that even a thing? If you're going to get rid of Freddie Kitchens, you're naturally going to want someone with experience. But that experience can't come at the cost of a good fit. Guys like Mike McCarthy and Rivera have the experience in spades, but don't really fit the on-the-field needs of the Cleveland Browns. And in Mike McCarthy's case, the off-the-field needs especially. A guy like Pete Carmichael Jr. might just be the right fit for the Browns. Yes, he doesn't have a ton of head coaching experience, but he does have a ton of NFL coaching experience. For 20 years, he has been one of the best offensive assistants in football. He has been one of the best offensive coordinators in football for 11 years. He has learned from Marty Schottenheimer and Sean Payton, two of the greatest offensive minds in football history. He has 2 decades of experience of working with the greatest 6-foot quarterback of all time and has watched him grow and has experience with him that would be valuable to teams who currently have a shorter quarterback. His offense answers all the questions that the Browns have not been able to answer all season. Sure, it is odd that he has been able to be as good as an offensive coordinator as he has been for over a decade and not even gotten a sniff at a head coaching opportunity in the NFL somewhere by now when much less qualified guys have. But I don't think Sean Payton and Drew Brees would trust a fool as the offensive coordinator for 11 years. And even the last guy who was the offensive coordinator for Sean Payton, Doug Marrone, seemed to have no problem getting head coaching jobs elsewhere, as Doug Marrone is currently on his 3rd big-time football head coaching job, his 2nd in the NFL. But whether you believe that Sean Payton is wholly responsible for all of the success for the Saints, or you do believe that Pete Carmichael did have a decent hand in it, what the facts are that he has been the offensive coordinator for the Saints for 11 years. The 11 best years of both Sean Payton and Drew Brees' career. So yes, maybe for whatever reason he has been overlooked. But if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, this is the one guy that makes all the sense in the world for the Cleveland Browns to look at as a head coach. But that's just my thoughts on the situation. Let me know what you think down in the comment section down below. Do you think Pete Carmichael is right, or are you set on Mike McCarthy or Ron Rivera? Let me know down in the comment section below what your thoughts are. Thank you for watching. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ding the notification bell, and thank you for coming. And have a great day. Have a good night.